It was just a whisper in the dark, a desperate cry for help from a world under siege. Every other species stayed silent. But when the Deathworlders heard it, they answered with fire. A mining colony's last hope. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow across the command center of New Prosperity, a mining colony perched on the largest asteroid in the Kepler system. Captain Sarah Chen stood before the main console, her weathered hands gripping the edge as she watched the colony's vital signs deteriorate on the holographic display. The numbers painted a grim picture that grew worse with each passing hour. Oxygen levels in sectors 7 through 12 had dropped to dangerous levels. The water recycling systems in the eastern habitation modules were operating at 60% efficiency. Most troubling of all, the medical bay's capacity indicator showed a stark red warning that made Sarah's stomach clench with dread. "Captain, we've got another 17 cases in the last 4 hours." Dr. Marcus Okafor's voice carried the exhaustion of a man who had been fighting an impossible battle for 2 weeks straight. The colony's chief medical officer appeared on the main screen, his dark skin glistening with sweat despite the temperature controls. Behind him, Sarah could see the makeshift treatment area he had established in the colony's largest recreation hall. The crystalline plague had started small, affecting only a handful of miners who had been working the deepest shafts. At first, Dr. Okafor had thought it was simply exposure to an unknown mineral compound. The symptoms seemed manageable, a slight fever, some respiratory irritation. Nothing that standard medical protocols couldn't handle, but within days the infection had spread throughout the colony like wildfire. The plague attacked the lungs first, causing victims to cough up crystalline formations that grew larger and more numerous as the disease progressed. The crystals interfered with oxygen absorption, slowly suffocating patients from the inside. Dr. Okafor had tried every treatment in his medical database, but nothing could stop the progression. The colony's population of 3,000 had dwindled to fewer than 1,800 in just 2 weeks. "How many do we have in critical condition?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. 412, Dr. Okafor replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I've tried everything. Every antiviral, every antibiotic, every experimental treatment in the database. The crystals just keep growing. We're losing people faster than we can treat them." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had commanded mining operations on 3 different worlds and served as a pilot in the Earth Defense Fleet before taking this assignment. She had faced equipment failures, asteroid impacts, and even pirate raids. But nothing had prepared her for watching her people die while being powerless to save them. "Captain Chen to engineering?" she called through her communicator. "Tanaka here," came the immediate response. Engineer Yuki Tanaka had been working around the clock to keep the colony's life support systems operational as their population density fluctuated wildly due to the quarantine protocols. "What's our status on the environmental systems?" Sarah asked. "Not good, Captain," Yuki replied honestly. "The air recyclers in the affected sectors are working overtime to filter out the crystalline particles that victims are exhaling. The systems weren't designed for this kind of biological contamination. I've managed to reroute power from non-essential systems, but we're looking at total failure within 72 hours if we can't get replacement filters." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her shoulders. 3,000 people had trusted her to keep them safe on this remote outpost. Families had made New Prosperity their home, believing in the promise of a better life among the mineral-rich asteroids of the Kepler system. Now she was watching that dream turn into a nightmare. The colony had been established 5 years earlier as part of humanity's expansion into the outer systems. Earth's population had grown beyond the capacity of the home system, and colonies like New Prosperity represented hope for the future. The asteroids contained rare minerals essential for advanced technology, but more importantly, they provided homes for families willing to build new lives among the stars. Sarah walked to the observation deck that offered a view of the mining operations. In the distance, she could see the massive extraction platforms that had been silent for days. The workers who should have been operating them were either in medical isolation or had already succumbed to the plague. The sight of the idle machinery served as a stark reminder of how quickly everything had fallen apart. "Captain," came another voice through the intercom. This time it was Lieutenant Patricia Wells, the colony's communications officer. "I've been monitoring all frequencies for any traffic that might indicate rescue operations. There's nothing from Earth Command or any of the nearby colonies. It's like we don't exist out here." Sarah nodded grimly. New Prosperity was located on the edge of human space, chosen specifically for its isolation and the rich mineral deposits that made the journey worthwhile. That same isolation now worked against them. The nearest human colony was 6 days away at maximum burn, and Earth Command was weeks distant even with the fastest ships. She made her way to the communications center where Lieutenant Wells was hunched over her console, scanning through frequency after frequency. The young officer looked up as Sarah approached, her eyes showing the same exhaustion that plagued everyone in the colony. "Patricia, I need you to prepare an emergency broadcast," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Full spectrum, maximum power. I want this signal to reach every ship, station, and colony within 50 light-years." "Captain, that will drain our remaining power reserves," Lieutenant Wells warned. "If no one responds, we'll be operating on backup power within hours." "If no one responds, power reserves won't matter," Sarah replied quietly. "We'll all be dead." Lieutenant Wells nodded and began configuring the communication array for maximum broadcast power. The colony's transmitters were designed for routine communications with supply ships and regular reports to Earth Command. Broadcasting at emergency power levels would push the equipment beyond safe operating parameters, but Sarah had no choice. As the communications array powered up, Sarah felt the slight vibration through the deck plating that indicated the massive energy draw from the colony's main reactor. She watched the power indicators drop steadily as the transmitters reached full capacity. In a few minutes, she would send out a call for help that would either save her people or drain their remaining resources in a futile gesture. "Array at full power, Captain," Lieutenant Wells reported. "You're on in 5 seconds." Sarah took a deep breath and activated the microphone. Her voice would carry across space at the speed of light, reaching any ships or stations equipped to receive emergency transmissions. She had no way of knowing if anyone was listening, but she had to try. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the New Prosperity Mining Colony Kepler system, transmitting on all emergency frequencies," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect throughout her career. "We are experiencing a medical emergency of unknown origin. A crystalline plague has infected our population, and we have lost over 1,000 people in the past 2 weeks. She paused, looking around the communications center at the faces of her surviving crew. These people depended on her, and she would not let them down. The plague attacks respiratory systems, causing victims to produce crystalline formations in their lungs. Our medical officer has exhausted all known treatments without success. Our life support systems are failing due to contamination, and we estimate complete system failure within 72 hours. We have 1,800 survivors in immediate need of evacuation and medical assistance." Sarah's voice remained steady, but she could feel the emotions threatening to overwhelm her professional composure. These weren't just numbers she was reporting, they were her people, her responsibility. "Our position is Kepler System, Asteroid Mining Platform New Prosperity, coordinates transmitted with this message. We are uploading all medical data related to the plague in hopes that someone with greater resources can find a cure. Any ship capable of evacuation assistance or medical support, please respond. We are running out of time." She ended the transmission and nodded to Lieutenant Wells, who began broadcasting the message on repeat across all emergency frequencies. The technical data about the plague would be included with each transmission, giving any potential rescuers the information they needed to understand the crisis. For the next hour, Sarah remained in the communications center, hoping against hope that someone would respond. The colony's long-range sensors showed empty space in all directions. No ships appeared on the screens, no return transmissions came through the speakers. The void of space seemed to swallow their desperate call for help without offering any hope in return. Just as Sarah was beginning to accept that their situation was hopeless, Lieutenant Wells suddenly sat up straighter at her console. Her fingers flew across the controls as she fine-tuned the receivers, her face showing intense concentration. "Captain, I'm picking up something," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "Multiple contacts on long-range sensors. They're big, Captain, really big." Sarah moved to stand behind the sensor station, watching as the displays showed a formation of massive objects approaching their position. The contacts were still too distant to identify clearly, but their size suggested capital ships rather than civilian vessels. "How long until they reach us?" Sarah asked. "At their current speed, approximately 4 hours, Lieutenant Wells replied. Then her face fell as she read additional data from the sensors. "Captain, I'm also detecting another group of contacts approaching from a different vector. These ships are using a different propulsion signature. They don't match anything in our database." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Unknown ships approaching a distressed colony could mean many things, and not all of them were good. Pirates often monitored emergency frequencies, looking for easy targets. But something about these contacts seemed different, more organized than typical raider groups. "Keep monitoring both groups," Sarah ordered. "I want to know the moment you have any additional information." As she left the communications center, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their situation was about to become much more complicated. They had called for help, and something was responding. Whether that response would bring salvation or doom remained to be seen. The crystalline plague continued its relentless advance through the colony's population, while unknown forces approached through the darkness of space. New Prosperity had become a race against time, with the lives of 1,800 people hanging in the balance. In her quarters, Sarah Chen stared out at the stars and wondered if she had just condemned her people by sending that desperate message into the void. But as she watched the distant points of light, she held on to the hope that somewhere among them, salvation was finally coming home. When predators meet apex predators. The first ships to arrive at New Prosperity were not the rescuers Captain Sarah Chen had hoped for. 3 sleek vessels emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with an oily, iridescent sheen that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ships bore no markings that matched any known civilization in the human databases, and their design suggested technology far more advanced than anything the mining colony possessed. Lieutenant Patricia Wells tracked the unknown vessels as they approached, her face growing pale as the sensor readings revealed their true nature. These were warships, heavily armed and shielded, built for conquest rather than rescue. The lead vessel alone was twice the size of New Prosperity's entire defensive platform. "Captain Chen to the command center, Priority Alpha." Patricia's voice echoed through the colony's communication system, barely concealing her panic. Sarah arrived within minutes, still wearing the hazmat gear she had been using to visit the medical wards. The sight of the approaching ships on the main display confirmed her worst fears. These were not the rescue vessels they desperately needed. "Have they responded to our transmissions?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Nothing, Captain," Patricia replied. "They're maintaining radio silence, but their sensors are conducting intensive scans of our entire facility. It's like they're cataloging everything we have." Dr. Marcus Okafor joined them in the command center, having been summoned by the emergency alert. His medical expertise wouldn't help with alien contact, but Sarah valued his judgment in crisis situations. Behind him came engineer Yuki Tanaka, whose knowledge of the colony's defensive systems might prove crucial in the coming hours. "What do we know about them?" Dr. Okafor asked, studying the alien vessels on the display. "Nothing good," Yuki replied grimly. "Those weapon signatures are unlike anything in our database, but the power output suggests they could reduce our entire colony to atoms in a matter of minutes." As they watched, the alien ships took up positions around New Prosperity in a classic blockade formation. Any hope that these might be potential rescuers evaporated when the lead vessel began charging what appeared to be a massive energy weapon aimed directly at the colony's main habitat section. Then, without warning, a new voice filled the command center through the communication system. The voice was cold, mechanical, and spoke in heavily accented Standard Terran that suggested the speaker had learned the language recently. "Human colony, you will prepare for immediate inspection. Your continued existence depends upon your compliance with Zephyrian Empire protocols. Any resistance will result in immediate termination of all biological assets." Sarah felt her blood run cold. The Zephyrian Empire was a name whispered in fear throughout the outer colonies. Reports from deep space traders spoke of entire civilizations that had simply vanished, leaving behind only empty worlds and scattered debris. The Zephyrians were apex predators who viewed other species as nothing more than potential threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the New Prosperity Colony," she responded, trying to keep her voice steady. "We are experiencing a medical emergency and require humanitarian assistance. We pose no threat to anyone." The alien response came swiftly and without emotion. "Your medical crisis has been noted and analyzed. The crystalline plague represents a potential biological weapon that could threaten Zephyrian interests. Your species has been classified as a contamination risk. Sterilization protocols will commence in 60 minutes. The communication channel closed, leaving the command center in stunned silence. The Zephyrians had condemned the entire colony to death not out of malice, but out of cold, calculated policy. They viewed the plague as a potential threat and had decided that elimination was the most efficient solution. 60 minutes, Yuki whispered. "They're going to kill everyone in 60 minutes. Sarah's mind raced through their limited options. The colony's defensive systems were designed to protect against asteroid impacts and small pirate raids, not military assault by advanced alien warships. They had no weapons capable of penetrating Zephyrian shields, no ships fast enough to escape their blockade. "Patricia, are you still monitoring for other contacts?" Sarah asked, grasping at their last remaining hope. "Yes, Captain. The second group of ships is still approaching, but they won't arrive for another 3 hours. Even if they're friendly, they'll be too late." Dr. Okafor moved to a secondary console and began accessing the colony's medical database. "Sarah, if we're going to die, at least we can make sure our research data survives. I'm uploading everything we've learned about the plague to an emergency beacon. Maybe someone will find it and develop a cure for other colonies." As the doctor worked, Sarah found herself thinking about the families sheltering in the habitat modules. Children who would never see their next birthday, parents who had sacrificed everything to build a new life among the stars, elderly colonists who had survived the hardships of frontier life only to face extinction at the hands of alien predators. The countdown continued relentlessly. 45 minutes. 40 minutes. The Zephyrian ships maintained their positions with mechanical precision, their weapons charged and ready to deliver death from the void. Then, at 37 minutes remaining, Lieutenant Wells nearly fell out of her chair as her sensors detected massive energy signatures emerging from hyperspace. The second group of contacts had arrived early, and they were moving at speeds that should have been impossible. "Captain," Patricia shouted, her voice cracking with excitement, "the new contacts are human ships. Terra Defense Fleet markings. It's Admiral Morrison's task force." On the main display, 12 massive human warships materialized out of hyperspace in a formation that spoke of military precision and overwhelming force. The lead vessel was the TDF Indomitable, Admiral Kate Morrison's flagship and one of the most powerful warships ever constructed by human engineers. The sight of the human fleet had an immediate effect on the Zephyrian blockade. The alien ships began repositioning themselves, clearly recognizing that they now faced opponents with technology sophisticated enough to challenge their supremacy. Admiral Morrison's voice filled the command center with authority and confidence that made Sarah feel hope for the first time in hours. "New Prosperity, this is Admiral Kate Morrison of the Terra Defense Fleet. We received your distress call and have come to render assistance. All colonists are to remain in secure locations while we address the current situation." The Admiral's next transmission was directed at the Zephyrian ships, and her tone carried the unmistakable edge of someone who had spent decades defending humanity against all threats. "Zephyrian vessels, you are in violation of galactic protection protocols by threatening civilian populations. You will withdraw from this system immediately or face the consequences." The Zephyrian response was swift and arrogant. "Human warships, you are outnumbered and technologically inferior. The biological contamination on this colony poses a threat to galactic stability. Your interference will not be tolerated." What happened next would be remembered in military academies throughout human space for generations to come. Admiral Morrison's task force had not come to negotiate or to engage in diplomatic posturing. They had come to protect human civilians, and they would let nothing stand in their way. "All ships, weapons free," Admiral Morrison commanded. "Target the Zephyrian vessels. Show them why Earth is marked as a restricted world." The human warships opened fire simultaneously, unleashing weapons that represented centuries of technological development driven by the harsh realities of survival on a death world. Particle beam cannons that could pierce any known shielding, kinetic railguns that accelerated projectiles to significant fractions of light speed, quantum torpedoes that could disrupt matter at the molecular level. The Zephyrian ships responded with their own weapons, filling space with exotic energy patterns that would have destroyed most known vessels. But the humans had learned long ago that the universe was a hostile place, and their military technology reflected that harsh reality. The first Zephyrian ship died within 30 seconds of the engagement beginning. Its shields, designed to stop conventional energy weapons, simply could not cope with the quantum interference patterns generated by human particle beams. The vessel's hull buckled and collapsed as its structural integrity failed at the atomic level. The second Zephyrian ship attempted to ram the TDF Relentless, perhaps believing that physical impact would succeed where energy weapons had failed. The human vessel's point defense systems activated automatically, filling space with a cloud of micro-projectiles that reduced the attacking ship to debris before it could close to ramming distance. The third and final Zephyrian ship tried to retreat, but human pursuit vessels were already moving to intercept. The alien ship's faster-than-light drive never had a chance to engage. Quantum torpedoes disrupted its engines, leaving it dead in space and completely helpless. The entire engagement lasted less than 5 minutes. 3 Zephyrian warships that had seemed invincible to the colonists had been destroyed or disabled by human forces with clinical efficiency. The demonstration of power was both beautiful and terrifying to witness. New prosperity. This is Admiral Morrison, came the welcome voice over the communication system. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We are deploying medical and evacuation teams to assist with your plague crisis. Our xenobiologist, Dr. Elena Vasquez, believes she may have a treatment based on the data you transmitted. Captain Rodriguez of the Terra Defense Marines was already launching assault shuttles loaded with medical equipment and personnel trained in hazardous environment operations. These were soldiers who had trained on the most dangerous worlds humanity had discovered, and a crystalline plague was just another challenge to overcome. Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized on the main screen, her dark hair pulled back severely and her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. Captain Chen, I've reviewed your medical data, and I believe the crystalline formations are actually a form of silicon-based life attempting to establish symbiosis with your people. The key is not to fight the crystals, but to modify them into a beneficial form. Dr. Okafor appeared beside Sarah, his face showing desperate hope. Doctor, we've tried every conventional treatment. What are you proposing? Controlled viral vectors carrying modified genetic instructions, Dr. Vasquez explained rapidly. We reprogram the crystals to serve as enhanced oxygen processing organs instead of obstructions. Your people won't just survive, they'll be better adapted for low oxygen environments. As human medical teams descended on New Prosperity, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility finally lifting from her shoulders. Her people would live. More than that, they would be stronger than before. The crisis that had threatened to destroy them would instead make them better suited for life among the stars. But even as rescue operations began, Admiral Morrison was already planning the next phase of operations. The Zephyrian Empire had revealed itself as a threat to human civilians, and that was something the Terra Defense Fleet could never tolerate. The 3 ships at New Prosperity were just the beginning of what promised to be a much larger conflict. In the depths of space, other Zephyrian fleets were receiving reports of the engagement, trying to understand how their supposedly superior vessels had been destroyed so easily by a species they had dismissed as primitive. They were about to learn that humanity had not spread across the galaxy by being weak or defenseless. The colony was saved, but the real war was just beginning. The galaxy learns why Earth is forbidden. 3 weeks after the rescue of New Prosperity, Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the war room aboard the TDF Indomitable, studying a holographic display that painted a picture of systematic genocide across 12 star systems. The intelligence gathered from the captured Zephyrian vessel had revealed the true scope of their empire's crimes against sentient life. The Zephyrians had not simply conquered territory or enslaved populations. They had methodically eliminated entire species that they deemed inferior or potentially threatening. Worlds that had once supported thriving civilizations now orbited their stars as barren rocks, their atmospheres stripped away and their populations reduced to archaeological records. Captain Sarah Chen stood beside the Admiral, having been invited to participate in the planning sessions as both a witness to Zephyrian methods and a representative of the civilian populations they had threatened. Her experience at New Prosperity had given her insights into enemy thinking that proved valuable to military strategists. Show her the Altair system data, Admiral Morrison instructed her intelligence officer. Commander Lisa Park activated a new section of the holographic display, revealing surveillance footage that had been recovered from automated monitoring stations. The images showed a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents, populated by a peaceful species of aquatic beings who had achieved early spaceflight capability. The Keltorians had a population of approximately 2 billion, Commander Park explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. They were herbivorous, completely non-aggressive, with technology roughly equivalent to human standards from 50 years ago. The Zephyrians classified them as a potential future threat and sterilized the entire planet. The next images showed the same world 6 months later. The oceans had been boiled away by orbital bombardment. The continents were nothing but scorched wasteland. Not a single trace of the Keltorian civilization remained except for the melted ruins of their cities. 11 other species suffered the same fate, Admiral Morrison said quietly. The Zephyrians have been conducting what they call preemptive species management for the past 2 centuries. They identify any race that might eventually pose a challenge to their supremacy and eliminate them before they can develop adequate defenses. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had successfully treated the plague at New Prosperity, looked up from her analysis tablet. Admiral, there's something else. The crystalline plague wasn't natural. It was a Zephyrian bioweapon designed to test human resistance to exotic pathogens. New Prosperity was being used as a laboratory. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. The people who had died in her colony, the families who had suffered, had all been victims of an alien experiment designed to find better ways to exterminate humanity. The Zephyrians had turned human beings into test subjects for weapons of mass destruction. How many human colonies have been exposed to similar testing? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. At least 17 that we know of, Dr. Vasquez replied. Each one was exposed to a different type of bioweapon or environmental hazard. The Zephyrians have been studying us, learning our weaknesses, preparing for a systematic extermination campaign. Admiral Morrison walked to the tactical display showing Zephyrian territory. Their empire controlled over 40 star systems, with military bases strategically positioned to strike at any species that showed signs of technological advancement. They had built a galaxy-spanning infrastructure of oppression and genocide. The Galactic Council knows about this, Commander Park reported. We've shared our intelligence with every known peaceful civilization. Their response has been disappointing. The main screen activated to show Ambassador Theron of the Andromedan Collective, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. His crystalline form glowed with the soft light that indicated emotional distress, but his words carried the resignation of someone who had accepted defeat. Admiral Morrison, the Andromedan Collective acknowledges the evidence you have presented regarding Zephyrian activities, Ambassador Theron said in his musical voice. However, our analysis indicates that direct military action against the Zephyrian Empire would result in the extinction of all currently existing civilizations. Their technology and military capacity are simply too advanced for conventional resistance. Admiral Morrison's expression hardened. Ambassador, are you suggesting that we should allow genocide to continue because it's too dangerous to stop it? We are suggesting that survival requires accepting certain realities. Ambassador Theron replied sadly. The Zephyrians have made it clear that species which do not threaten them are allowed to exist. Those which challenge their authority are eliminated. Logic dictates cooperation with this system rather than futile resistance. The communication ended, leaving the war room in angry silence. Sarah looked around at the faces of the human officers and saw the same expression she felt on her own face. Complete rejection of the idea that evil should be tolerated because fighting it was dangerous. What about the other species? Sarah asked. Surely someone else will stand with us. Commander Park activated a series of communication records showing responses from various galactic civilizations. The pattern was depressingly consistent: fear, resignation, and unwillingness to risk confrontation with the Zephyrian Empire. Some species even suggested that humanity should accept Zephyrian dominance rather than provoke a wider conflict. They're all afraid, Dr. Vasquez observed. They've accepted that the Zephyrians are unstoppable, so they've convinced themselves that submission is the only logical choice. Admiral Morrison moved to the center of the war room, her presence commanding attention from everyone present. Her next words would determine the fate of not just humanity, but every innocent species in the galaxy. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears that the galaxy has decided to abandon justice in favor of survival, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never backed down from a fight. That is their choice, but humanity did not spread across the stars by accepting the unacceptable. We did not survive on Earth by surrendering to superior predators. She activated the master tactical display, showing the positions of all known human fleets throughout the galaxy. Dozens of task forces appeared on the hologram, representing the accumulated military might of a species that had learned warfare in the most hostile environment imaginable. Operation Righteous Fury will commence in 72 hours, Admiral Morrison announced. Every human military asset will participate in simultaneous strikes against Zephyrian installations across their entire empire. We will demonstrate to the galaxy that evil does not become acceptable simply because it is powerful. Captain Rodriguez, the Marine commander who had led the rescue operations at New Prosperity, stepped forward. Admiral, the Zephyrians have over 400 military installations across 40 star systems. Even with our entire fleet, we're looking at overwhelming numerical disadvantage. Admiral Morrison smiled grimly. Captain, the Zephyrians have spent 2 centuries believing that their technology makes them invincible. They've never faced an enemy that was willing to sacrifice everything to stop them. They're about to learn the difference between superior technology and superior motivation. The next 72 hours saw the largest military mobilization in human history. Fleet commanders received sealed orders that would not be opened until the operation began. Supply ships raced between star systems, distributing specialized weapons and equipment designed specifically for this campaign. Intelligence teams infiltrated Zephyrian space, gathering final targeting data and sabotaging key installations. Dr. Vasquez worked around the clock with teams of scientists, developing countermeasures for every known Zephyrian weapon system. The aliens had sophisticated energy shields and exotic matter weapons, but human engineers had learned long ago that every technology had weaknesses that could be exploited. Sarah found herself assigned to the command staff of Admiral Morrison's flagship, serving as an advisor on civilian protection protocols. Her experience at New Prosperity had taught her how quickly alien threats could escalate, and her insights helped planners prepare for unexpected developments. On the morning of the operation, Admiral Morrison addressed the combined human fleets through secure communication channels. Thousands of ships holding hundreds of thousands of military personnel listened as their commander explained why they were about to risk everything in a war that the rest of the galaxy considered unwinnable. Fellow humans, Admiral Morrison began, her image appearing on screens throughout the fleet. Today we strike not just for our own survival, but for the principle that innocent life has value regardless of its military power. The Zephyrians have spent centuries believing that might makes right. They have exterminated entire civilizations because they could. Today, they learn that sometimes the universe produces a species willing to fight for others even when victory seems impossible. At exactly 1200 hours Galactic Standard Time, Operation Righteous Fury began. Human fleets emerged from hyperspace simultaneously at 40 different Zephyrian installations, catching the enemy completely unprepared for the scale and coordination of the assault. The TDF Vengeance materialized in orbit around the primary Zephyrian shipyard, immediately engaging defense platforms that had never faced opposition. Captain Williams' task force deployed quantum mines that disrupted the exotic matter foundries, setting off chain reactions that consumed entire manufacturing complexes. Admiral Chen's fleet struck the Zephyrian Intelligence Center in the Proxima system, using electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable their quantum communication networks. Without coordination between their scattered forces, the Zephyrian Empire began fragmenting into isolated, vulnerable targets. The battle for the Zephyrian homeworld lasted 18 hours and became legend throughout human space. Admiral Morrison personally led the assault against the planetary defense grid, her flagship taking massive damage as it carved through enemy formations that had never retreated from any foe. The Zephyrian Emperor himself took command of the final defense, his massive dreadnought engaging the human fleet in a battle that lit up the entire system with energy discharges. But human determination proved stronger than alien technology. The TDF Indomitable rammed the Emperor's ship at near light speed, sacrificing itself to eliminate the symbol of genocidal oppression. When the 72-hour campaign ended, the Zephyrian Empire had ceased to exist. Their military was destroyed, their leadership eliminated, and their infrastructure reduced to wreckage drifting through space. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for 2 centuries had been brought to justice by humans who refused to accept that evil was inevitable. The aftermath brought profound changes to galactic civilization. Liberated worlds began rebuilding their societies. Species that had been driven to the edge of extinction returned from hidden refuges to reclaim their ancestral homes. The Galactic Council underwent fundamental restructuring as its members realized that survival required courage as well as caution. Captain Sarah Chen found herself appointed as Earth's first ambassador to the reformed Galactic Assembly, her experience at New Prosperity making her an ideal representative for human values. The colony itself was rebuilt as a monument to the principle that no cry for help should go unanswered. Dr. Elena Vasquez established the Galactic Medical Research Institute, dedicated to developing treatments for biological weapons and ensuring that no species would ever again face extinction from engineered plagues. Her work on the crystalline plague led to medical advances that benefited countless civilizations. Admiral Morrison was posthumously awarded the Galactic Cross for extraordinary heroism, the first human to receive the Assembly's highest honor. Her sacrifice at the Battle of Zephyria Prime became a symbol of humanity's willingness to pay any price for justice. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed Earth and its children. The species that had once been marked as dangerous because of their world's hostile environment were now recognized as dangerous for a very different reason. They were the ones who would fight when everyone else had given up hope. Years later, when new threats emerged in distant sectors of the galaxy, the first response was always the same. Send a message to Earth, tell them innocents are in danger, the Deathworlders will come. And they always did, because Sarah Chen's simple distress call from a mining colony had taught the galaxy a fundamental truth about humanity. When their children cry out in the darkness, Earth answers.